thank y'all for the flowers. 2 sets of flowers. That's what was really nice. And Ashley, your meditation was, I don't know if you knew it, this is perfect for what I want to talk about. Perfect. Uh, we all got mothering, I guess, from different sources, you know. Some of it might have been from our own mother, in some cases, probably not. But and some of us I know had a really hard time with our mothers, and others just got along beautifully with them. But we still got mothering one way or another. And okay, so I'm going to ask y'all, if you're, what is it that you receive or experience from someone when you recognize that they are embracing you with a mother's love? What is it that a mother's love provides?
A sense of well-being.
Sense of well-being, yeah.
Acceptance.
Acceptance. Nurturing.
Seeing you as who you are and that you have potential.
Ooh, beautiful, yeah. Come on.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
Encouragement.
Encouragement. Anything else? What's a mother do for her child? Takes care of her, gives her guidance, protects. Yeah, all that stuff, right? Yeah. You know, my mother, I was lucky. I got along wonderfully with my mother. She was an amazing woman. She was a great woman. My dad, I did not get along with very well. He was a little narcissistic, but he was a father and he provided for us perfectly and beautifully. And I'm grateful to him for that. And he also taught me some things. He said some things that were very wise. He was a smart man. But my mom was truly a nurturer, a protector. She was someone who gave me that sense of unconditional love that I will never, ever, ever forget. But I have felt that same stuff surrounding me throughout my life. And not just from people at all, but a sense of protection, nurturing, and guidance that is somehow universal. I don't know if that's the right word, universal, but it has surrounded me every step of the way in ways that are just undeniable, that are absolutely blatant, knock you over blatant, where I know that the universe is right there as a mother, protecting me, guiding me, nurturing me, getting my butt out of trouble. It's just, it's just, in my case, it's shocking when I look back. And for the first time, yesterday actually, I put together a list of experiences that I cannot deny are the universe providing me the protection and the love that I absolutely required at that moment in order to survive. This is really it's kind of a risk that I'm taking to share this stuff. Mainly because if I were you, I wouldn't believe some of them. If I were you, no, I wouldn't. I mean, they're just pretty much unbelievable in some cases. But I will guarantee you that every single word I'm telling you is absolutely correct and accurate and truthful. I don't really understand it. I don't. All I can get out of these experiences is that I am so surrounded and enveloped with this protection, with this love, that there is absolutely no reason whatsoever for fear. Fear at this point in my life would be unreasonable. It wouldn't make any sense. And when I get through this list, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I don't want you to misunderstand this list of things I'm sharing. I'm not saying in any way that I am even remotely special. I don't have a clue why God has chosen to allow these things to happen. Except maybe to get me to a point where nothing could cause me to fear. That's the only thing I can come up with. Maybe you can help me after I share them. And I'll ask you if either of you had any experiences of this sort. I'm just going to start going through a list. Okay, that's all I can really do. They're not necessarily in alphabetical order or chronological order. I just typed them and tried to remember them all. In one case, I had gone to Belize, and some of you that may know that when you are in developing countries and you go into like a smaller town, you ask, who is it here that will take in strangers and use that little house as like a motel. And there's always two or three. I've never run into a small town there wasn't two or three people that were taking in. And that's what I always did when I went to these little towns. So I got off this bus in this little bitty town in Belize, and I asked this kind of younger guy, says, who takes people in here? He says, I can do it. And I was a little shocked. He's a younger guy all by himself. And I went, okay. So went to his place, and we were sitting and talking. And eventually he says, can I have do you mind if I ask you for a couple of dollars? He says, there's some people that are down the road that are in real need. And he says, it would really help them. They have a baby and it's really tough for them to get by. And I said, sure. I gave him a couple of bucks. He left, and suddenly it hit me like a ton of bricks to get out of there. Get out right now. It was like overwhelming shaking. You have to get out of this house now. So I grabbed my backpack and I ran. And there was a little motel actually in that town, and it was just too cheap to pay the 25 bucks to stay there. So I went by it. I says, I think I better stay here. I stayed at this guy's house, and I got the creepiest feeling I had to get out right now. And she said, what was his name? And I told her. She said, what did he look like? I told her. She said 2 years ago, he invited a couple of German people to stay with him. He left the house to supposedly give some money to some people. And what he actually did is he collected friends who came back and beat them almost to death. And stole everything they had, their passports and everything, but it couldn't be proven that it was him. And she said, we're very fortunate you left and you listened. I was. Okay, I'll go to another one. There's a little teeny tiny little itsy bitsy, not even a town, called Puerto Libertad in Mexico. And it's not far down, not very far at all. There's a larger town named Bahia Quino that's a little further down. But Puerto Libertad, if you are crazy enough to drive 6 hours on sand, then you can get to Perch Libertine without going all the way down and coming back up to the Aquino. And I'm like, okay, that's what, so I always did that when I went there. It was a neat little place. There was nothing there. I mean, there was a little shack where some people sold rice and beans, cooked rice and beans, so that fishermen, if they wanted to put, come up there and get that. So I got the rice and beans for them. And that was kind of neat. But it was just the beach that I would go to. I'd go to this little beach and there was rocks on it. It was really neat, a nice sand beach. And on the way to this place, you had to go through the Seri Indian Reservation. And have you ever seen those? You know what ironwood is? Those ironwood statues, ironwood sculptures. They're made by the Seri Indians. And I was going through there, and it's nothing to look at. I mean, there's just some houses and stuff like that. And I was driving through in my Dodge Colt, and I looked, and there's this teenager I could see through the window, and he suddenly just fell off the table he was sitting on, laughing. Because I wasn't driving a truck, I was driving this little car. And it was getting beat to crap on there. Actually, when I got back home, they said, you banged up every single part of the truck underneath, except for this one tube that would have cut your gas off. Everything else was beat up. And I'm like, oh. But so I stopped there, and I knew that I was going to be, after I went back down there and stayed a few days at the beach, I was going to be turning around and coming right back to the States because it was my last stop. So I didn't need anything. I didn't need money. I didn't need anything. I'd been down there for a couple of weeks. So when I stopped, I thought, well, why don't I give these people the stuff that I don't need? So I emptied my truck out, gave them all my dirty clothes, oh, very grateful. I gave them all my cassette tapes. I opened up my wallet. I said, I need $20 for gas, because there's no gas stations that you stop at people's houses. They would have 5-gallon drums full of gasoline, and they'd siphon it out of it into your truck. And I said, I'll need, that $20, that's it. So I gave them everything but the $20. And basically the truck got emptied out, except for what little things I needed to camp out for a few days. So I started camping. That was really cool. And the next day, I walked down the beach a long ways, real long ways, and turned around and came back. And my truck with my car, Dodge Colt, was black, and it was a white sand beach. So when I'm walking back, I'm like, the car's not there. Somebody's stolen my car. So I started panicking. So I just, started walking faster and faster. And next thing I knew, when I got up a little closer, I could see this big, old truck had parked in front of my Dodge Colt, and it was covered with sand, so you couldn't see it. It was sand covered. So I'm like, what this is all about. So I walk up there, and there's this drunk guy, drunk, like falling down drunk, and he had a pistol in his pants. And he comes up to me and he goes, we're going, in the back of the truck, there was a bunch of guys. And he goes, we're going to kill you, and we're going to steal your vehicle. And I go, okay. I remember talking to the guy, but I don't remember being scared. I just remember talking to him. And I found out later on he was the sheriff, which was nice.
Of course.
Yeah, So as I'm talking to him, this really large Indian guy comes down off the back of the truck, comes up and brings the sheriff over to the side and chats with him. And okay, so then the sheriff comes back and he says, okay, we're not going to kill you. We're not going to steal your car. I go, okay. So, then they decide they're going to camp right there with me. We're going to share a camp place. And I'm like, okay. And they like, I can see that they're about ready to make some food, and they're all preparing to get drunk. And I had a bottle of brandy underneath the seat of my truck, and I had food in the car, so I brought it out. And they all said, no, we don't want to have anything that's yours. I said, okay. So the next morning I woke up, I had been sitting up in my coat, kind of leaning back, but when I got up that morning, I was face first in the fan, leaning out of the truck, and everything in my truck was there and they were gone. I found out in the conversation with those guys that the big guy who got down from the truck was a Sarah Indian. And he had been on the reservation in that spot and had seen me stop and give everything that I had away to those people. And he knew I didn't have anything. So that's what saved my life. This is a different one, but I was in Cozumel, Mexico. Seems like I was wearing enough to go to Mexico, but and when I did get stopped by the Zetas down there not too long ago, and they were aiming their guns at me and wanted $100, and I faked a bunch of tears and said, oh, they have 35, and they gave me 35. I got away with it, but that isn't in the story. That's kind of not such a big deal. But anyway, I was out snorkeling in Cozumel, and I had my head under the water, you know, the orange thing sticking up. I kept hearing this boat, and eventually I lifted my head up, and this boat was like as close as you as be to you. It was right there, and the whole front of it was lifted up out of the water, and it was a twin engine motorboat that was going full speed, and they hadn't seen me. And there was absolutely nothing I could possibly do. I was going to be run over because there was no alternative. And I thought, so you know how these thoughts come instantly, this thought was, stick your butt out and it will knock you out of the way. Well, that doesn't work when you're in the water. So, I mean, it worked nicely because on a road, but in the water, it should just push me down. And I looked and I could see the two propellers coming directly at me. And this thought was, you're gonna die. This is it. You're dying right now. And what happened is my body went into both propellers. It was just sucked in. And one of them hit my butt and the other one hit my ankle. And it was the distance between the two engines. And it broke the back of their boat off. The transom of their boat was both broken off. One of the engines went into the ocean, and the other one was hanging by a broken piece of wood on the transom that had been broken off. And I popped up out of the water, and I could see one of my legs just floating like this, just the other one, you know, had muscle, but the other was, I assumed it had been cut off. It was just hanging. But I got over to the boat and I pulled myself in. And it was a Mexican couple. It was two Mexican men who were taking an American couple out to Penancla Reef, which is an underwater national park. And I've never before since seen true hysteria. Never seen it before. I didn't know what it was. I thought hysteria was you got upset. But this woman went completely berserk. She thought I had been cut in half and I was going to be pulling in stone. But when I pulled myself in, she couldn't believe that there was a whole person there. She thought I had been cut in half under my bathing suit. So she went over and grabbed my bathing suit and just yanked it off. And went into she just started shaking and her head started going back and forth. She sat down and she couldn't stop shaking. When I got back to the hotel where I was staying, which is the Hotel Barracuda, it was the only hotel that had a dive shop in it. So it was the it was where the divers and the boaters would come. And the lady who was running it, she's an older lady, but she said, I've been here since I was a child in this motel. And she says, I have known many people who get run over by boats. And she said, all of them died except for two. And one of those lost an arm and a leg, and the other one lost both their legs. She said, I've never known anybody that walked away. And I still get chills when I think about that. That was many years ago. Now I come back to my house in Cushing, Oklahoma, where I visited, and I was up on the roof and fixing Christmas lights, and I was wearing the pants that I wear here sometimes in the middle of the winter that are real fluffy. And I wore them specifically so that I could sit down on that composition roof and scoot and it would hold it, you know? And all of a sudden, I was up there and I all of a sudden knew, beyond the shadow of a doubt, I was going to fall off the roof. There was no question in my mind. And about that moment, I started to slide. And I slid from the apex of the house where I was sitting down to the edge, and my heels hit the gutter. And that stopped me forward head first. And I went head first onto my truck. And I tried to put my hands out, and that's how I got that big scar, because that road destroyed my wrist. And it's perfect. But I bounced off the truck and went on the side of my face on the pavement. And that was it. When I told my nephew, he freaked out. He said one of his friends had just died within the last year. He was a roofer, fell off and went head first and was dead. But somehow I walked out of it just with a broken wrist and a messed up face. Sorry. But, you know, I don't understand it. Now, this is the one, if I were you, I wouldn't believe. But God's honest truth, it happened just like I'm saying. I was in Colorado, I decided I was going to climb up the Venable Trail. And I had my backpack and my tent. I went up maybe an hour and a half, and I was looking for a place that I could go down to that was relatively flat, like a pitch tent. I found a place, really nice. Got out and decided to continue up the trail. I was just going to go for not very far, so I just brought my day pack with I think some food in it. And it was so gorgeous. It was so beautiful. And I was so into this hike, I couldn't stop it. I just kept going. And all of a sudden something said, Bill, you got to turn around. And I went, ugh. So I did. I didn't even have a flashlight. And about 45 minutes later, it became pitch black. I mean, absolutely, you couldn't see your hands moving in front of your face. Absolute absence of light, complete blackness. And here I was on this trail, you know, it was like this. And so I thought, well, the only way I'm going to survive this is I have to crawl. So I got down and started crawling. And I crawled for about an hour. And then something said, you know what, you could probably walk and be all right. And so I got up and I started walking. And I was all right. I don't know how I managed to stay on the trail, but I was okay. And I don't know how much longer after that, maybe a couple of hours of walking. Something said, the same kind of thing as the voice that said, get out of that house. The same voice said, turn left now. And I did. It was crazy, but I did. I figured I would just fall. Well, I turned left, and it was slopey. but I was able to walk on it. And then the next thing I knew, I was falling. I just fell, and I don't know how far I fell, not terribly far, maybe about 8 feet, something like that. 10 feet, and I landed on my day path and started rolling. And eventually I stopped rolling and got up. And I just suddenly started sensing that love, that protection all around me, like a light that, although it was pitch black. And I kept walking a little bit, and the next thing I knew, I tripped and fell flat on my face. And I had tripped over the guide wire of my tent. God's honest truth. This is stupid. This is just for fun. But some friends came from California came to visit me when I was there in Colorado. And we went up the mountain, from Durango, about half hour. And there was a cabin out there that I knew about. We were walking along, and next thing I knew, there was a band of wild horses that were walking by, and I went, "Oh, how cool! These wild horses." I mean, no, nothing, just bare wild horses. And I went, "This is the coolest thing." So I thought, well, that's really neat. I'm gonna have to go ride one. Oh, geez. So I did. I went over there, and I swear one of those horses let me jump on it. And I was like leaning forward, holding it around the neck, and oh, this is cool. And they're just walking real slow, and I thought, oh, this is the neatest thing. And the next thing I know, they were gonna get rid of me. So they ran into a stand of aspens and turned a quick left, and I shot off that thing like a tick, and landed up my back up against an aspen tree. Oh, that hurt so bad. It was a big giant bump. But the weird thing about it that I would survive. But the thing that surprises me, it was a whole herd of horses. And here I was laying on the ground, and they were all jumping all over me, jumping around and jumping over me. And that's how people get killed, stampede horses. And not one hoof touched me the whole time. And that did surprise me a lot. Is this crazy? Are you getting anything out of this, or am I just saying stupid things?
No, it's great.
You serious? Okay. I hoped this stuff would end when I moved to Franklin. I really did. Because it's unnerving, to say the very least. This is just a theme going through my life that I don't understand. I got to Franklin, I really thought, well, it's gonna end. Well, I've been here probably about 6-7 years and nothing weird had happened. So I thought, well, maybe it has ended. And one night there was a huge thunderstorm. I mean, massive thunderstorm, big thunderstorm. And I heard a big crash outside the house, and I ran out, and there was a tree had fallen across the road and across my driveway, and this little truck was stuck there. He was trying to go back and forth. And I ran out to see if he was okay. He says, "Yeah, I'm okay. I just need to get through this way, And he says, I said, "Oh," he says, "You know what?" He says, "That my job is to remove trees." And in the back of his truck, he had all this tree removal equipment. And I went, all right, let's get this tree out of the way. So I stood back by the house while he cut the tree into 15-foot sections. And he got the first section all wrapped up in the chain. And by the way, it was pitch black, raining, and at night, but it was a warm rain. So I was out there, it was comfortable, but it was pouring rain. And so I got way back, he got the first segment wrapped in a chain, and he took off with it. But what none of us knew, these are pine, it was a pine tree. You know how a pine tree at the top is where the green is? And then down below, it's these spikes that stick out that used to be branches, okay, that's what it was. these were branches that were, or logs that were covered in those spikes. And what we didn't know was that the first segment was hooked to the second segment with two of those spikes. And when you went forward, it slingshot that tree trunk directly at me. And there was nothing I could do. It was coming at the speed of light right at me with these giant spikes. And again, it was the same thing I had this thought is when I saw this propellers. It's like, well, you're going to die. It's not possible to survive this. And this voice again comes and says, I mean, it's not that voice I can hear, says, throw yourself over backwards now. And so I said, okay. And I threw myself over backwards, and that log went directly over my body, almost touching me. And the miraculous thing, as far as I'm concerned, is none of the spikes were pointing downward in that section. And when it came over me, I tried the best I could to get out of the way, but I couldn't get my head out of it. And it hit me and knocked me out. And so I'm sure I was laying like turkey with my mouth open in the rain. But you know, the guy comes back, you know, and I hear him, and I would kind of wake up and I go over there, and I says, you know, that log just came at me and knocked me out. And I look in the mirror in his truck, and I just had a little bump and a little scratch, and that's it. And I'm like, well, I guess this stuff isn't going to happen. And that leads me up to Aiden. You asked me to tell the story of what happened when I went on my little ill-fated trip to New Mexico. It was not ill-fated. It was short but amazing. But I thought what I'd do is try to put it in context of all these other things. I got all packed up for 3 months. A lot of food, a lot of water in the back of the truck because I was going to be going through the desert. And my first stop, I got to a national forest in northern Alabama. And found a neat spot to camp. And went out hiking for a ways with the dogs, came back, sun set, absolutely gorgeous, perfect, flawless temperature. So I got my chair, laid it out there, and it was just, this is fantastic. And how many of you guys know anything about campers? Just campers, right? Campers. Okay, how do you lock a camper? I mean, you know, if you have a key, how do you lock it? What do you do? With key? Yeah. From the inside or the outside?
If you're outside, you lock it on the outside.
Yeah, right. You get there, you get the key, you lock it, right? It's not like a door where you can punch a button on the inside. Yeah. You have to lock it from the outside, right? So about 10 o'clock, I decided to go inside. I go there, the door is locked, and the keys are laying inside. And I have absolutely no clue how it's possible that door got locked with the keys inside. And I panicked because the dogs were in the camper asleep on the bed. Long story short, I got a hold of AAA. They got somebody out there, locksmith got it open. And I said, how did this happen? He says, I've never seen this happen before. I have no idea how it could possibly happen. She said, you have to block it from the outside. So, okay. So that was my very first night. And my first thought was, is this the way it's going to be? Am I going to have to cancel this trip? So I went, okay, no, I'm going on. So I decided to drive all night that night and get all the way to southern New Mexico. And I did. And I got into a national forest, which is what I always want to do because you can camp there. And there was cow patties all over the place because they will lease out the land to cattle in the national forest a lot of times, especially out west. And oh, that's okay, you know, I mean, cow patties, could be worse. So I, you know, get myself all nice and leveled out, and I open up the camper door, and the camper's completely filled with water. And I'm like, the water container, 11 gallons, is below the level of the floor. How could there be water inside the camper? This is impossible. And I would, you know, the first thing they tell you when you buy one is don't get water inside the camper, that'll ruin it. So this is my brand new camper, so I started freaking out. I grabbed whatever I could, drying it, scooping out water. And thank God I was at 6,500 feet, it was dry as a bone. And I got all this water off the floor and it's dried instantly. So I went, okay, the camper's gonna be okay. So, I had thrown everything, including all the silverware and everything, out of the camper so I could clean it, so the silver was all laying out the cow patties. But that was okay, you know, that's all right. So,
And the water's gone, so you can't.
and yeah, the water's gone, I got the water, you know. And I went, this is okay too. I eventually get down to a town and got some water. But I was like, this is my second stop on a 3-month camping trip. How can this possibly be? And so the thought in my head was, is this telling me I've got to turn around? Is this a warning? Saying, get out of here, go back, something terrible is gonna happen if you don't. And in my head, I said, yeah, this is what's it saying. But I didn't want to listen to it. I was stubborn, and then the thought, I swear to God, this is true. The thought kept rolling in my head, Bill, I think you're just being bullheaded. You really should turn around. This is clear. You should turn around. And then it was like, hell no. I'm not turning around. I came all the way out here and I'm going on this vacation. You know, and then I heard a noise behind me. And I turned around and it was a bull. It was a bull. You know, it was all these cow patties, so I knew there were cows, but you know, I turned around, it's a bull. And I went, oh my God. I just thought, am I being bullheaded? And I turned around and I see a bull. And I'm like, still, nope. There's your sign. Here's your second sign. Third sign. Are you gonna take it? And I was like, no, I am not turning around. So I slept that night, about froze my ass off because everything was wet, and the dogs had peed on the blankets that were there because they were blocked in the first night. So all I had was wet blankets or pee blankets. And so I thought, well, let's take the wet and the pee blankets. And I curled up in them and managed to get to sleep, got up kind of early the next morning, and I went, I'm going forward. By God, I'm going forward. And I did, and I didn't make it 30 miles. I got down the mountain, and it was like, got down the mountain, and I saw a real pretty, some pointed peaks, and I thought I'm gonna take those a picture of those. So I pulled off the road, it was on a highway, pulled off over the shoulder of the road, and went across and took some pictures, and came back, and I went, why is my camper in the front? It's supposed to be low. Why is it like this? Why is it pointing down? So I got underneath the hitch to look. I swear to you, you know, you have the hitch, right, which has got the ball on it, and it goes into a little slot in your truck. It's called the receiver. And then, you know, it has a little pin that goes through it that holds it on. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That big old thick pin. The pin had vanished. And I had no clue why that camper didn't just slide off and be held by the chains. But it didn't. It was just in there. And I have no idea why. Because I've been going up and down and everywhere down that mountain, and no point did it slide out of the receiver. And I thought, oh, this is really weird. So I managed to finagle it around, driving back and forth a little bit where I could get that hitch back in the receiver. And I got a pair of pliers, rubber handle pliers, and jammed them in that hole, since I didn't have the pin. And then I noticed that the brakes, the electric emergency brakes, whatever you call those, with the little box that's on the side, on the trailer, that if your trailer, if the camper comes loose, it'll slam your brakes on the camper. You know what I'm talking about? Some of you don't want to talk about. But it had been tripped, and there was a little plastic thing hanging down, and I went, that's why I can't go forward anymore, is because this thing blocked up. Well, I'll just stick that little plastic piece in there and release the brake, and I'll be out of here in no time, right? So I poked that thing back there, and somehow the truck came out of gear, popped out of gear, and I had the emergency brake on. All of a sudden, the whole rig starts rolling backwards, and I'm lying directly behind the truck, underneath the hitch. So I don't know how I did it, but I managed to jump out of the way so that it wouldn't, all four tires wouldn't run over me. And at this point, I'm seeing the truck and the camper rolling backwards down the hill. And I go, oh my God, it's got to go into the traffic. The whole thing is going to roll into the traffic, and this is going to be horrible. So I started grabbing at the door, and I grabbed so hard at the door handle, pulling it, trying to get the door open as it rolled past me, that I pulled and it slid me underneath the truck. Why the door didn't open, I don't know, but it didn't. And I looked, and the truck ran over my leg on the pavement. And I just looked at it, just watched it go over my leg, and there was no real emotion to it. I was, oh, well, a truck ran over my leg. And, okay. So I get up, and also about that time as I get up, the truck and the camper, as it's continuing to roll, they jackknife. And thank God they jackknife, because that stopped it. And it didn't go any further. So I'm going back to the car to get in, because my dogs are in the car. And door just opens up, just like nothing. It should have. And all these people started pulling over and checking, and they're like completely flipped out that I'm standing up, because they watched the truck run over them. So this guy says, well, here's where you can go get a pin for that thing. And he gives me direction. He says, they can keep going, you go to them for urgent care. And I went there, and they refused to see me. They said, no, we won't. You told us you got ran over by a vehicle. You have to. You've got to get x-rays and CAT scans and stuff. This is, we can't do anything. And so I get to the hospital, and they do, long story short, they do all the x-rays and CAT scans, and sewed up a place on my leg. And the guy goes, the doc goes, he says, I told him, I said, look, I can stand up on that leg. It's not broken. And he says, you've got two bones down there, a tibia and a fibula. I forget which is which, but he says, one of them is the weight bearing bone. The other one doesn't bear weight. That one can be broken. And I went, okay. So, and he says, and if nothing's broken, he says, it have to be. He says, but if it's not, you would most certainly have internal bleeding. And I said, okay. So long story short, he does everything, all the CAT scan stuff, comes back, and he says, his words exactly were, You're the luckiest man I know. He says, there's not even a turtle week. Obviously, something was very, very loudly and clearly telling me to go home. Turn around, go home. Something terrible is gonna happen if you don't. And I started doing some research on this when I got home, and I found a quote from Oprah Winfrey, where she says, your life speaks to you in whispers. That little nudge telling you something doesn't feel right. If you ignore it, the whispers turn into pebbles, thrown at you, warning you that there's a problem. If those signs remain unexamined, you will inevitably experience what feels like a heavy brick to the head. Shutting out that brick guarantees disaster will strike. I got ran over by my truck as I was listening. You know, but you don't just get run over by your truck that's packed for 3 months for camping and not get a broken leg. You don't, it doesn't happen. You're gonna have at least serious damage to the leg. I just told Dr. Linzo about this, and he said when he was younger, he got run over by his car and he was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Didn't break any bones, and just did all kinds of tissue damage. Nothing happened to my camper. I was okay. This was the universe wrapping its arms around me and saying, as gently as she possibly could, with my stubborn bullheadedness, you have to turn around and go home. And it was like my mother guiding me. I thought, okay, so I called back to the house with the lady staying there who's a chaplain. And I told her what had happened. I said, I gotta come home. I'm sorry you can't stay like you were planning to. And she said, well, let me tell you what happened. And I said, what? She said, I was in the living room and I heard a pop in the back of the house. And it was really loud. And she said, I went back to investigate. And she had been doing some laundry earlier, and her laundry basket was in the middle of the room and it was on fire. In the middle of the room. In a bedroom. And she grabbed it, took it out, and threw it out and hosed it down. I don't understand that part. And I started thinking that all this was a poltergeist. You know, poltergeist moves things. Okay, locks my door, turns the faucet on inside the camper while I'm driving. So, you know, empty all the water out into the sink and overflow it. Would take my car out of gear and take it and remove it and undo the emergency brake. Cause the pin to disappear. And I kept thinking, this is poltergeist stuff. And then a psychic I was speaking to that I know said, I was sitting in my room and I heard a voice 3 times loudly saying, your mother doesn't like being called a poltergeist. And then I started to reevaluate. This is just one event after many events in 35 years. And these aren't poltergeists. These are protection. These are to teach you that you never, ever, ever, ever need to fear. To remove fear from your life. You're being taught, you're being guided, you're being protected, you're being mothered, you're being nurtured. And then the events of the last couple of weeks on my ill-fated trip, started making sense. Was it my mother? Was it my guardian angels? Were all these things my mother? Were they my guardian angels? Is my mother a guardian angel? I don't know. All I know is that this universe will wrap you up in complete love and protection in a way that you can't comprehend. All you have to do is open up and be willing, and it will show you how loved you are. It's beyond my wildest imagination. And because of it, because of that motherly love, whether it's my biological mother or the love of the universal mother, I know right now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I will never again have received.